On April 18, 1943, 4 teenage boys ventured into Hagley Woods. These 4 boys, Bob Farmer, Robert Hart, Fred Payne, and Thomas Willetts, were from nearby Birmingham, England. The impact of the war was felt by most of the world, and almost no one was spared. The war left many starving as food became scarce. It was not a fun time. Hungry, the boys decided to do something about it. Although they weren't supposed to trespass into private property, they went in to search for food. They came across a tree with holes in its stump, large enough to look into. One boy took a peek inside and saw what looked like an egg, but upon closer inspection, it was not an egg. The boys were disappointed but more so scared, because what they were looking at was a human skull. One extra curious boy used a stick to pull out the skull, but returned it right after. There were still long strands of brown hair attached to the skull. The boys vowed to keep the finding to themselves and never speak to a soul about it. However, just 2 days later, one of the boys couldn't hold the secret any longer, and he told his parents. His parents, understandably shocked, did the right thing. The police were dispatched to the scene, and there, they discovered the skull, exactly where the boys said it would be. The tree was approximately 5 to 6 feet tall. The police took out as much evidence as they could manage. They were surprised that human remains could be found inside, because the hole was quite narrow. They recovered a full set of human skeletons. Some of the bones were found scattered in the area. They figured that animals may have gotten into the decomposing remains at some point. One thing they noticed when retrieving the remains was that clothes were found, still attached to the skeleton. Meaning, the woman was likely inside the hole already, before she decomposed to only skeletons. It was originally assumed that maybe the skeletons were tossed into the tree by whoever was involved. Forensic scientist, Professor J.M. Webster, examined the remains and determined that the remains belonged to a woman between 25 to 40 years old. But he had a hunch that she was closer to 35 at the time of death. There were no signs of external injury on the bones, no signs of violence or disease. However, a large piece of fabric was found in her mouth. It made the professor thought that the woman was asphyxiated. Other descriptions of this woman were that she was 5 feet tall, had light brown hair, dressed in a striped dark blue and mustard-colored cardigan, and a mustard-colored skirt at the time of death. They also found one blue shoe outside the tree and another inside the tree. The shoes were matched to each other. They were a set of 5.5 in size. One more item retrieved from the tree was a gold wedding ring. The woman may have been married. Someone's missing wife. The forensic scientist ruled that the woman had been dead for at least 18 months at the time of discovery. They ruled out suicide as a possible cause of death, as the holes in the tree were much too narrow to get in safely without tearing herself up in the process. Someone must have put her there. Police released details about the woman, and calls came flooding in. But none was a match to the woman. They also could not identify the woman through missing person files. Undeterred, they called in dentists from the area to look at the teeth. The woman had a peculiar set of teeth that would have stood out to anyone who saw her. The front teeth overlapped the bottom row of teeth. A tooth was also missing from the right side of the bottom row. They realized that the tooth must have been pulled from the woman's mouth within a year of her death. If one dentist could recognize her, it would make the case so much easier to solve. Unfortunately, it led nowhere. No dentist was able to positively identify her. In March 1944, a message written in chalk was found on the external wall of an empty building. The message read, "Who put Bella in the Wych Elm, Hagley Wood?" Investigators were stumped. Who was the person behind the message? What was his or her connection to the body in the tree? How did they know her name? Are they involved in her death? Some speculate that some mischievous kids wrote the message, but it was too high up the wall, and too large for children to write conveniently. So, an adult wrote it then. But who? Another message was written months prior, on a house with a similar message. It read, "Who put Bella in the Wych Elm?" Both messages were done in the same handwriting and font size. So, it's believed that the same person wrote them. In August 1944, 5 months after the previous scribbling, another message was found. This time, it read, "Hagley Wood, Bella was opposite Rose and Crown Hasbury." It was almost as if the person was trying to bring attention to the case. Was he or she trying to speed up the investigation? Or was it a taunt? It's not the first time the killer would do things like this, to mock the police. One notable killer who did this was Jack the Ripper. He wrote letters to taunt the police, and they never got him, while he was alive. Given these clues, investigators were unable to find any Bella, or Lou Bella, who has gone missing in the area, who also matched the physical characteristics of the body, found in the Wych Elm. In 1953, 9 years after the last scribble appeared, police found the person responsible for the graffiti. Turns out, the person was just playing a prank. He knew nothing about the woman in the tree. He doesn't know her name, or her story. He has no idea whether she was named Bella. After some further investigating, he was ruled out as a suspect. One theory is that the woman went missing during the air raid. It would have covered up any screaming that occurred, if someone wanted to harm her. It would have also been pretty easy to dispose of the body, without anyone noticing, during the air raid. Since most people would have sought cover elsewhere, instead of being out in the open, in the middle of the woods. However, if this is what happened, it would be pretty hard to track down a suspect, so many years later. Are they even alive? Probably not. Theory number 2. In 1950, an article was published in the Birmingham Daily Gazette, written by an Egyptologist, Dr. Marguerite Murray, who theorized that the woman found in the Wych Elm was a victim of human sacrifice. There were still some remnants of witchcraft operating in parts of Britain at the time. This practice is so old that it predates Christianity. According to written accounts of those who practiced this religion, devil worshippers would periodically sacrifice human victims to the devils, since life was taken out of the ground through farming, and something else must be put back in. As you can imagine, not many want to volunteer as tribute, so these devil worshippers would have to abduct their victims, if they want to find a human sacrifice. The woman was only 5 feet tall. Small size for a woman, even at her time. She would have been quite easy to abduct, and render immobile, for the ritual to take place. Dr. Murray believes that another body found in the area was also a victim of human sacrifice. There are talks of the area being home to the witches, during the time that this woman would have been alive. They believe that trapping a witch's spirit in a hollow tree would prevent her from causing any more trouble in the world after death. So, the body being found in the tree may have a symbolic meaning. Did this woman cause any trouble to anyone? Was she a loner, which is why she was targeted and assumed as a witch? Or was she just a convenient target, due to her body size? If human sacrifice, and witchcraft, was the reason for her demise, that is. There are some evidence that the tree was occasionally trimmed, which stunted its growth. Was someone trimming the tree to prepare it to house a witch's body? Theory 3. The reason no one came to identify the woman's remains was because she was a foreigner who didn't know many people. It would also have been possible that she was a Nazi spy. In November 1953, 10.5 years after a skull was found by the 4 teenage boys, a letter arrived at a newspaper company claiming that they know who the woman in the elm tree was. The letter read, "You will never solve the mystery. The one person who could give the answer is now beyond the jurisdiction of earthly courts. The affair is closed, and involves no witches, black magic, or moonlight rites. The person responsible died insane in 1942, and the victim was Dutch, and arrived illegally in England, about 1941. The letter was signed by Anna." This Anna was eventually tracked down by the police, and interrogated. The person responsible for writing the letter was named Una Mossop. She claimed that her husband, Jack Mossop, an Air Force pilot, was caught up in the spy ring. The woman in the elm tree was a spy, who wanted to find out where the next air raids would strike. The next detail is where it gets a bit murky, because there are different stories of how Jack Mossop was connected to the woman in the tree. Some said that Jack, together with Van Ralt, another spy of the same clan as the woman, was out drinking together in a bar one night. The woman was there with them. She got too drunk, so they carried her into the woods, and stuffed her in a tree, to teach her a lesson. It's not really in their place to teach her anything, but moving on. So, it may have possibly been a prank gone wrong. The woman may have died after waking up, and realized that she could not get herself out of the tree on her own. When Jack and Van returned, she was already dead. But if they were placing her in the tree to teach her a lesson, it's likely the woman should have woken up at some point, when her skin was being squeezed and scratched by the tree. Remember, The opening of the tree was narrow. Even for a 5 feet tall woman, it would have required quite a squeeze. Had Jack and Van violated the woman after she passed out, and decided to place her remains in the tree after they suffocated her? If it was a prank, they would not have stuffed a piece of cloth in her mouth to either suffocate her or to keep her from screaming. Another account stated that Jack and Van were driving down a road in a car at night when they came across the woman, who was in the same spy ring as Van. Due to a disagreement, Van strangled the woman. He then put her in the tree. Jack was present throughout the entire ordeal. This certainly fits with what may have caused the woman's death. She was likely suffocated to death. Maybe with a pair of hands around her neck first, and then with a piece of fabric stuffed in her mouth. When the body was found, there were only skeletons left. So any strangulation mark, if there were any, would be long gone. Whatever the motive was, the killer may have known that no one would look for her if she was gone. Knowing that the woman was a spy, there wouldn't have been anyone to report her missing, and if anyone local did report her missing, they would only know her false identity. If Una was correct, that the woman entered Britain illegally, there would be no proper paperwork to link to her if the body was found. A perfect crime. Whoever caused her death may have seen the opportunity and got away with it, without ever getting caught in their lifetime. Una explained that whatever happened to the woman gave Jack nightmares. He would wake up in sweats. His mental health was in continual decline since that night, and he eventually had to get admitted to a mental hospital, where he died sometime later, in 1942. It's hard to know if any of this is true, since we only have a third-person account of what may have happened. But if it is true, what did Jack witness that sent him spiraling into such madness? Jack may have died within a couple of months after the incident, in a mental institution. Maybe he felt guilty that he didn't intervene. Or perhaps, he felt guilty about participating with Van in harming the woman? If they did go to a bar that night. Perhaps, Jack and Van were at least a bit drunk. Too drunk to think straight. However, the story doesn't end there. Donald McCormick, an author, researching for a book about the case, made a trip to Holland, Netherlands. He wanted to know whether Una was right, that the woman in the elm tree was Dutch, and if there was any evidence to support this claim. He found a man called Lehrer, who recruited people to work in Britain as spies during World War II. Lehrer had a girlfriend who was Dutch and lived in Birmingham in the 30s. She could reportedly speak without a noticeable Dutch accent, because she had spent so much time in Britain in the 30s. This made her a pretty good candidate as a spy. Donald turned up reports that 5 spies were sent to England from Holland in 1941, at the height of World War II. By the time the body in the elm tree was found, in April 1943, the body had been in the tree for at least 1.5 years, which fits with the timeline. 18 months ago from April 1943, was October 1941. We don't know what month this operation was carried out, but it is still within the right time frame. If you remember, Una revealed in her letter that the Dutch woman entered Britain illegally in 1941. This piece of evidence was a match from these 2 sources. One of the spies sent to England was given the code name Clara. She parachuted over Hagley Woods, but was never heard from again. She was assumed dead. Donald also went and tracked down a former Nazi who knew Clara, and he gave a physical description of her that largely matched with the woman found in the elm tree. Could it be possible that Clara found herself stuck inside a tree after parachuting down? But if that was the case, shouldn't there be evidence of a parachute? No remnants of a parachute were discovered in the area. Perhaps Clara did get out of Hagley Woods after parachuting down. Maybe even managed to do a bit of spying, but got tangled up in something that ended up being a costly mistake. Analysis of her bone revealed that the elm tree woman had given birth before. So it's possible that this woman got a few living descendants walking about. She was someone's missing mother and wife. Unfortunately, we're unable to use modern DNA analysis technology on this woman because her remains have been lost. Her case has changed hands so many times that it's hard to track down who possessed which evidence, at which point in time. Has someone taken her remains? If so, why? To rebury her? To do something with it, because of her ties to witchcraft and black magic? Or is it simply filed wrong? With so much mystery surrounding the case, let's hope one day we'll be able to uncover them all. One possibility of how to solve this seemingly unsolvable mystery is to try and find more remains of her, inside the elm tree. Maybe a bone fragment was left behind. If they could extract some DNA from the remains, and link it to living descendants, we'll know for sure where she comes from. With a name and a face, it'd be easier to track down her whereabouts, intentions, and who she had been in close contact with, at the time of her untimely end. If they still have the piece of fabric found inside her throat, maybe they can try and extract any DNA that the perpetrator may have left behind. Or, if Donald could track down the real identity of the male spies sent over to Holland in 1941, perhaps one of them was Van. Had Van told anyone anything about that night? Are any of those people alive today to fill in the gaps? There is certainly still hope in solving the Bella and the Wych Elm mystery. Thanks for watching. For more mysteries like this, please check out this video next.